story, some connection. So if you start naming them for yourself, you've established a slight bond, like just between you and the animal. It's not reciprocated. It's not the animal has a bond with you. It's like, but then you're able to like, I'm getting to know this animal, so I can shoot it a bit more. I can get a little bit more familiar. And I think the same thing is with if you now flip it, because I mean, I've been in that world as well a little bit, if you want to move that to an athlete point of view. Now, if I say I go up to a cyclist or footballer, if I don't know them, I'm just going to shoot them like any art on the wall. But if I start getting to know them, I will shoot them differently. I shoot them a little bit more intimately. I shoot them a little bit more because I got to know them a little bit. And if I address them, so I find that helps in that format. Once you get to know your subject, get to know your character, get to know your whatever's in front of your lens on a slightly personal level, you get a lot more out of it.
I am Baiki Venki, and this is the Working Athlete Podcast. Here, I talk to working athletes from all walks of life and experts from various sports to provide you with inspiration, training tips, time management, and lifestyle advice. If this is something that interests you, please make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any future episodes. Today's guest, Darius Conz, is an MTB rider and a wildlife cinematographer. In this episode, we talk about his cycling, MTB, Enduro, and downhill cycling in India in general, and his life as a wildlife cinematographer. It was a fascinating conversation exploring the parallels between sport and wildlife photography and a lot more. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. With that, let us get into my conversation with Robin. Hi, Robin. Welcome to the Working Athlete Podcast. It's a pleasure having you on the show.
I think it's great to be here. I've seen some of the episodes and see a lot of familiar faces on it. So it's great to be on it as well.
Awesome. So, Robin, let us start by talking a little bit about your relationship with sport growing up.
Well, I've been always somehow involved in sports, right? From a young age, I was playing football. We used to cycle to school. There's always some sort of physical activity. It was always right from a young age. Like, I mean, we're talking about 3, 4, 5 years old. And there's always been that part. There was a very short period of time when one sat and played computer games. But even to get to the computer center, we either walked or cycled. And that's pretty much how it's always been.
Where was this?
The initial stages was in Germany. I mean, up till about 10 years old. Mm-hmm. Then after that, I moved to Uti, where that kind of continued. Didn't really change. And then after Uti, I moved to Bangalore. And there it changed a little bit in terms of couldn't really move around on a cycle anymore. You got older, cycling wasn't cool anymore. You wanted a scooter. But football was still a big part of it. So kept myself active playing football. And then after that, I moved to Masnagudi, where I started working.
What is work?
Right now, work is I'm a camera person. I operate your cinema cameras and I do wildlife documentaries and photography as well whenever I can.
Right. I think the first time we met was maybe on trail or downhill thing.
It must have been in 2013 at Bangalore Cycling Championship. I think one of those races.
Yeah.
Either at the cross country or the downhill.
Yeah. And it's been fascinating for me to kind of watch your journey as a photographer, videographer, and and I keep seeing the downhill and MTB pictures as well. So you're still doing it in some capacity or the other. So let us talk about how you kind of got into the MTB downhill kind of thing.
Well, as I said, I was kind of always a bit into cycling. I always used it in one form or fashion. Then I fell out of it because of just non-availability. At one point, I think this was in 2000 and, well, early 2000s, there wasn't actually a big cycling scene in India. It was very small, very niche, and getting even a cycle was like really difficult. I had a cycle when I was in 10th standard, and we decided to be smart Alex, and we rented it out to some classmates of ours while it was the Sierra break, and they gave it to us completely broken, like to the point that the brakes were melted and stuff like that.
Wow.
We don't know what they did to it. And so since after that, kind of there was a bit of a gap in terms of cycling because, yeah, I didn't really have the finance or the interest to repair it. And there weren't no spares available for like some of these bikes. And you didn't know about mechanics and you just like
Right.
did what you could. So there was a bit of falling out on it. And then in 2000, say 7 or something, I was working with a company called Get Off Your Ass, Santosh. And then this was also around the time that Bums on the Saddle started opening up. And then we decided to get back into cycling. We did also some tours with cycling at that point. Very small, very niche. But then again, the market especially in the South was pretty much non-existent. People were just getting into it, just starting, like realizing there's that you could cycle and you could buy cycles and not your normal heroes or your um, Atlas cycles, like actually proper Treks and more like Bergamot, other branded bikes that people would be more familiar with. But then, of course, it came at a price tag that people were still not happy to pay. They were already happy to pay with their 7 or 8,000 rupee bikes, but then you start throwing around 25,000, 30,000 bikes. Then they're like, maybe not. And so we started that a bit. We didn't run it for too long, but it was then slowly getting back into it. Then in a few years later, then I picked up a bike of my own. I didn't have one at that point. Just started going back into the communities, like finding out. I think there was Bike Zone, the forum.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
All of us kind of were
yeah,
on that Bike Zone forum back in the
yeah.
day. Yeah.
Got onto that. Started researching. Met a few people, and then picked up a Giant. And then realized, yeah, road cycling wasn't my thing. I couldn't do it. And then really started digging around.
So you got a giant road bike.
No, I got a Giant. Oh, what was it? Revel.
Okay.
The Giant Revel. It was a pretty much an entry mountain bike.
Mhm.
But then I realized I want to do mountain biking. That's something always I preferred doing, and trying to find that little niche in town was. I was living in Masnagudi at that point,
Right.
so I wasn't attached to the Bangalore scene. And then I came across Nelly and Iggy. So Iggy is still very much part on the cycling scene.
Right.
I met them and they were just starting off pro cycle at that point. Again, this was in 2013.
Right.
And then I started getting more back into it and realizing, yeah, this is the genre that I really enjoy doing and this is what I want. And I just continued doing it. And then, of course, I wanted to be in the cycling scene and I was just transitioning jobs. And then the BBCH was picking up quite a bit and like, okay, let me be part of that world and started photographing. I was photographing earlier, like just more hobby wise, but then I wanted to really get into it professionally. And the BBCH was kind of that stepping stone of, okay, now we're going to get proper at it. We're just going to have other people critique the work and people wanting to see more photographs. And that's kind of the way it started.
Wow, that is quite a bit. So BBCH cycling has quite a bit of role in your current profession. Is that accurate to say?
It it started off.
Started.
It started
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
And I really hoped that I could continue with it, but unfortunately at that point, the same thing with the BBC, there wasn't much money in it, and so you couldn't really like
Yeah, it's all
generate.
like, pro bono, volunteer
Yeah,
kind of stuff, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So then I had to look for work, and then I was doing a bit of wedding photographies, stuff like that, which I didn't fancy at all. And since I was new in the market, it was difficult to find those connections. But then a friend of mine, he was into wildlife filmmaking, and I realized at that point, while I was doing the BBCH stuff, is that uh, you need to do video as well. There's no client anymore that's going to take photographs and videos like separately. They wanted everything wanted to be combined. So I started training myself in videos. And at the same time, a friend of mine said, "Hey, I'm doing wildlife." He had a project with National Geographic, and he's been doing a lot of work with National Geographic in the past. And I happened to be in Bombay for a wedding shoot, and he said, "Come across, just stay around for a couple of weeks more, and then this project's happening." And then I jumped into that, and that been now almost 10 years.
Wow.
And then unfortunately, because of that work took over, I couldn't do the BBCH as much as I wanted, because then, yeah, BBCH was every Sundays, early morning, and those were my Sundays I wanted to sleep. So unfortunately, that took a back step.
Right, right. But yeah, it is kind of fascinating to retrace our steps a little bit. At the start, like you were mentioning, the scene was quite niche. um, I think it was in Turhalli a little bit. I'm not sure if you were there. Turhalli downhills were a thing, and then some Sarjapur trails,
Yeah.
which more or less non-existent right now. But these were the small places where we used to go, take part. Turhalli downhill was a big part of it. Now, unfortunately, it is like out, I think.
Yeah.
And more of now it is more of Awalhalli and stuff. But there are still pockets where we can get out of the city and get lost in the wilderness. Still, there are some pockets out there. But coming back to your this thing, right? Your journey as a photographer and videographer. Uh, what are the kind of major pivot points for you in this journey as a photographer and videographer?
Well, there were quite a few, as you could call, I mean, pivot points, you could say. Milestones is one of them. Um, so one of them was I was keen on editing. I liked editing, so I started with this company also mainly as an editor. So then I did the edit, the video, and then the photography. So I did kind of the three things. I was also because of the cycling aspect, I really enjoyed mechanics, like fiddling with stuff. So I was also doing sometimes setting up a system or how to get like sometimes we need to build a rig to get a shot. We can't just put a tripod on and just have it as it is. Because of those kind of things, it was always somehow interesting, and we always tried doing something. The main thing where it got really kind of where we got busy or such, where you could say it was a milestone, is back in 2017. We started this project called Wildcats of India. This was a commissioned project by the National Geographic, NatGeo Wild, and that was a 2-year project. So I was handling the media, I was doing some of the edit, and then also a little bit of the filming. We had a few other camera people. It was kind of a relatively a decent sized project in terms of, I mean, it's not Planet Earth size. I mean, it was still a 2-year project, and then I ended up going to the UK to finish the edit. I was then the main editor for 2 of the episodes, and the third one I kind of just helped finish up. Now, we worked with somehow like the best in the business, you could say. Like we worked with the sound team that works on all the big natural history production, like including Planet Earth, Our Planet, and everything that's pretty much big.
Yeah.
We managed to work with the same people. So that was a great experience and learning point to just find out that you have access to those people. And the funny thing was, the main sound like designer, I mean, the dubbing mixer, he's into mountain biking.
Wow.
Yeah, so we gelled really well at that point because we would just chat about little gadgets and pumps and this while we are trying to finish our project. But yeah, it was good. Then we went out for a ride. We went to Bike Park Wales together, went for a ride together. And this is a guy who works on some of the biggest documentaries out there, and including Wallace and Gromit and other shows like that. He works on them, and it was really interesting. I mean, that ended in 2019. The show came out. Then pretty much a couple of months later, we had 2020, and then it all came to a screaming halt.
Yeah. So, interesting, right? So the working in projects that are like this big, like with the spanning 2-3 years, how does it take shape in your mind? How does it work? As in, like, do you have a outline or storyline, or because something like this spanning multiple months and years, how do you kind of conceptualize and give it a shape?
Well, that's always the difficult aspect of things, because it's natural history. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you actually are going to get the shot, but you do everything that you can to.
It's not like you are scripting something.
There's an outline of a script. Say, like, we had this project for it was called what's called Wonders of the Monsoon. It was a BBC production and was shot across the world, 7 episodes. We shot a very small episode, part of an episode, and they wanted bullfrogs mating and breeding. And because when a bullfrog is in breeding colors, it's bright yellow with blue vocal sacs.
Wow.
And it looks interesting. It's quite cool. But unfortunately, that year there was a cyclone that hit a few months, like a month before the monsoon. So now, of course, all the bullfrogs got into breeding mode, and because they confused it for the monsoon and started breeding early. So we missed that. Wherever we went, we found bullfrogs already finished breeding. But then, so we wrote to the production saying, listen, this is what happened. But then at the same time, we found the common toad breeding, and we managed to film that. And they also go bright yellow. So we filmed that as a backup. And then they just changed the whole thing, saying, yeah, we're just going to go with the toad then. Okay. So there's then that, okay, we want this, but we are willing to see if something else comes out. Because, I mean, there's no warning if something changes. Now, of course, there are certain highlight points where they say, okay, if you're dealing with the cats or the doles, wild dogs, they want a hunt. They want some behavior, because otherwise tigers are really boring to film.
Right.
They're really boring. I mean, they're either sleeping or walking, or sleeping and walking. So for you to get a hunt, it takes a lot of time. It takes effort. It requires you to know the animal. And that's where the natural history part of being a camera person kicks in. That you need to know the behavior of how these animals are going to behave in a certain situation. Like, oh, wait a minute, is that look or is that walk different from a normal walk? Does that mean they're going to be hunting soon? Or the stomach looks a little thinner. Okay, they're going to be now moving, so let's just stay with this animal. Compared to if you're just in a Jeep and like, oh, I got a photograph of an animal and woohoo, put it on Instagram. And our mindset completely changes when we see an animal. It's not like, yeah, I saw an animal. It's like, this is my paycheck. If I don't get the shot correctly, there goes my paycheck. So it changes a bit.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and it is something that requires a lot of patience and a lot of uh, keen observation skills, and it's not just about handling certain gear, right? It goes well beyond that.
Yeah, the better you know your gear, the less you have to worry about it. It's, I think, the same thing with any situation. I mean, if you want to compare it to cycling, if you want to compare it to motorbiking, if you want to compare it to any technical sport that any profession that requires tools, the better you know it, the easier the less you have to worry about it, and more you can concentrate on the craft or the situation at hand. If you don't know, like if you start fiddling where things are, you you might miss something, or you
Right.
might slip on something. You might, so that's it's as important that you know exactly where the buttons are, the shifters are, this is it, and pretty much know everything back inside out.
Right. When it becomes, your second nature,
Yeah,
when you know your equipment like back of your hand, so to speak, it becomes all the more, one less thing to worry about
exactly.
when you are out there. I'm talking as if I am the expert here, but
No, but
like
that's why it's easy to compare. It's
right,
because the last thing I want to do is worry if my equipment is straight, sorted, or where's this button? Let me have a look. And while all of this situation is unfolding in front of you, and you're fiddling around like, oh, where's the record button? Where's this button? Oh no, I've got my settings wrong and stuff like that. And then you have situations that happen in less than 2, 3 seconds, and it's over. And if you don't have it, well, then you don't have it. And then you can either tell your producer it never happened because you don't have it on film, or you inform them like, yeah, I kind of messed up. And then you have to stay longer trying to get it.
right. So you get a ton of this footage over over a period of time, and then you sit in edit and try to get a storyline out. So
Yeah.
what does that process look like?
So that process requires multiple people. The process requires very focused people, and because it's very time consuming. You can be looking at sometimes 200-300 hours of content.
Yeah.
And yeah, over 2-3 years, if you're shooting almost every day, it's very easy to accumulate 200-300 hours, and then to go through that for one single person. I mean, there are not enough hours in the week or in the month to
Right.
go through that amount. So you need multiple people, and then the tier system of between your director, the edit producer, the editor, the everybody involved that actually then goes and has a watch. And that's also very much where sometimes the camera person also gets involved and says, this is what I shot, and this is what I think has worked out. I've got these shots, and tells the edit, these are the shots, just mark them out. So that later on, when it comes to the edit, you already have little bits already pretty much ready straight from after the shoot. So you don't have to like go through all of that content later on. Because let's be honest, 95% of it is absolute garbage. I mean, you don't want to show to anybody. Because I mean, there's only so much deer. You don't have to shoot. I mean, everybody shoots deers. Everybody shoots some bird or the other. I mean, because when you're sitting there, you need to shoot something sometimes. And one day is better than next. One morning the light is better. One morning the light is, there's a certain situation which you think is nicer, so you film that anyway. So then to make sure.
Yeah, so like you're saying, 95% of it might be rubbish, but it is like, when you are mining gold, there is so much that you have to sift through to just find that tiny speck of gold, and
Yeah.
accumulated over a period of time, that kind of becomes your jewel, right?
Yeah.
So I guess that is somewhat similar to what that creative process of coming up with a lot of footage and then weaving a story around it, and coming up with something that is really interesting. In this case, maybe Cats of India, or projects like this, right?
Yeah, so the interesting part that was with Wildcats of India, because I was there from the start and I saw the whole process, like even from filming to being then in the UK editing it and sitting with everybody, it gives kind of a good understanding of how can one make it easier for the next one? And then you sort out all the errors and like, so now when I'm mainly, so now at this point, I'm mainly filming, but then I know what I'm looking for when I'm filming, in certain aspects. But then when I go back to my editors, I tell them, hey, this is what I've got. I think this will work well. Please just keep that together. And I think that makes their life now a bit easier.
Right. It's a teamwork
It's
at the end of the
yeah,
day anyway.
it's a big team that really needs to work well together.
Right. Yeah, I mean this for me to kind of get my mind around the task, it is really daunting. That amount of footage, that kind of multiple people having to go through it and um come up with a unified version of it is really something. It is a creative process of different creative minds coming together, I think.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. So what are some of the most interesting aspect experiences over the last, say, few years when it comes to wildlife photography or videography and stuff?
Interesting. Well, one of the more interesting animals that I've managed to film is a little ant called the jumping ant. I'm not sure if you've come across it. And they are very visual creatures, and they jump, and we were able to film them with a high-speed camera, shooting at 1,000 frames per second. And it's quite funny how you start humanizing these animals, like these ants, because you're working with animals that, well, first of all, don't even look at you. I mean, you're just part of the landscape for them. And you're trying to make them jump for your requirement. And then you start giving them names and like, okay, this ant is doing better than this ant. Okay, let's use this one. And it gets funny at times. We go a bit cuckoo as well. We are spending 3-4 hours trying to make an ant jump on command at a certain okay, I want you to jump from here to there. Don't jump from here to there. So you go a bit cuckoo over a period of time. Like I said, we've had, I mean, once you're in the field, there's so many things that happen quickly and you don't sometimes able to absorb them that fast. We were filming in Satara near Pune, and we're there during the peak of summer. Like this was April, May, and yeah, you're at 40-45 degrees heat. You're out there's no shade, there's no tree, nothing. Because these lizards have they're most active during that time of the season.
Right.
And they get they're very comfortable with people. They don't see people as a predator, so they actually might sit on you or come really close to you. And then you start giving them names because you start realizing each one is in their own territory. So we had one called Boulder Khan because that's his boulder. And then I forgot all the names, but yeah, that it makes it easier for us to keep some sanity because otherwise we'll like, yeah, lizard 1, lizard 2, and lizard 3.
Right.
And also it makes it a little more fun later on to just like I know people say you shouldn't get attached or you shouldn't humanize it, but I think it makes it easier if you do. If you give them a name and then you're like, okay, because you're then like realizing, okay, let me push getting this character out like this. Because at the end of the day, this is what people want to see. They want to see the character of these animals. They want to see some story, some connection. So if you start naming them for yourself, you've established a slight bond, like just between you and the animal. It's not reciprocated. It's not the animal has a bond with you. You're just like, but then you're able to like, I'm getting to know this animal, so I can shoot it a bit more. I can get a little bit more familiar. And I think the same thing is with if you now flip it, because I mean I've been in that world as well a little bit. If you want to move that to an athlete point of view, now if I say I go up to a cyclist or footballer, if I don't know them, I'm just going to shoot them like any art on the wall, like. But if I start getting to know them, I will shoot them differently. I shoot them a little bit more intimately. I shoot them a little bit more because I got to know them a little bit. And if I adjust them, so I find that helps in that format. Once you get to know your subject, get to know your character, get to know your whatever's in front of your lens on a slightly personal level,
Right.
you get a lot more out of it. You don't think of them as objects, because otherwise you can be shooting a bottle, a tennis ball. It'll basically be the same thing.
Right.
But if you start pulling out that personality and a perceived personality, you get a lot more interesting stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, what kind of curious if someone wants to be in your shoes and take up this as a career? Like, what are the kind of qualifications that they need?
Well, I'm the last one to talk about qualifications. I'm at 12 standard. Basically, I finished my 12 standard. After that, I stopped. I never went into college. I never went into higher studies.
Right.
But what I ended up doing was I realized I needed to learn. I still needed to learn. It wasn't like I was giving up education. I still needed to figure stuff out. So I went and did a mountaineering course. I needed to. I went to the Nehru Institute of Mountaineering because I wanted to learn
Right.
something in the outdoors. I wanted to learn mechanics. I took cycles apart, put them back together.
Right.
Photography was always there, so I learned that. Editing was pretty much self-taught. What I always say, if people want to get into into this field, it's not about, I think. I keep getting asked this question. It's not about the love of photography or I know photography. That is pretty much your standard. Like,
Almost everyone is expected to.
yeah. And nowadays people have a phone and everybody takes photographs and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
I can call myself a photographer if I have a phone.
I mean, if you're published and stuff like that, definitely.
Yeah.
I would say it's always to be completely open-minded, completely aware that, okay, there are different aspects to this. And especially in my field, like in wildlife, it's not only about being behind the camera. It's not about filming. It's not being in the field. There's so much work on the other side as well. It's the working with kit. It's production. It's research. It's a lot of aspects are there to this field, which sometimes people ignore. And a lot of people just want to be out there. They think wildlife filmmaking is being out in the forest 24/7. It's not. It's a lot of time in the office. It's a lot of prep work. It's a lot of figuring stuff out. I mean, we can't just go to a forest like that. We have to have a team in place that can get us the permits. We have to have a team in place that has the idea of what to shoot. Then goes speaks to people that can bring in the finances for it. So, if an opportunity presents itself to anyone, I think anybody should just go for it at any level.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you're just a person being a runner, like an office boy, even to that extent, because you still learn, you still get exposed.
Right.
I mean, when I started off, the only thing I was doing was carrying bags, literally.
Yeah.
I was just because I had no valuable input to that shoot at that point or period. It was just carrying bags. But still, that is, you learn about the equipment. Okay, this I have to pack this way. This I have to pack that way. And then you self-learn, you self-teach. And I think I come to a point that over the years, you can only teach somebody 10% of something. 90% is learned.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So it is, if to kind of summarize, it is difficult to kind of quantify in terms of qualifications, but you got to have lot of skills that are that might not come directly, visibly. They might not appear to be important, but you need to have, like, ability to research and ability to handling the gear is just one part, but there is a lot of other stuff that you just talked about that also need to be part of the overall skill set, so to speak.
And for example, I've got a colleague of mine. I mean, most of the people who've come in through, but especially now, he did his master's in I forgot his pretty much his whole title, but he's got a master's degree in biology. That's not the work that we have, and that's not the. He's now mainly into, yeah, setting up also camera systems, building up car rigs. Now he's getting into filming. He's just after like 3 years. He started off as an intern just before COVID and just stuck around, and now only he's getting behind the camera. It takes time,
Right.
and I think that's what's now getting forgotten. That you can't achieve certain levels of ability within 6 months. Everything takes time, and people don't want to invest that time anymore. And they want to jump the gun. They're like, oh, today I want to be, I don't have those skills, but within 6 months, I want you to teach me those skills. And then I want to be the main person out there in the field. And like, it doesn't work like that. Like for me, it's taken me almost 10 years to get where I am right now.
Right.
I mean, I started really small, just built up, built up, built up, built up. For the longest time, I was just in the office. I didn't even go out and shoot. Now, only after this period of time is where now I'm one of the primary camera people.
Right.
It takes a lot of time, and it's irrelevant if you are a qualified person with a master's degree or come from a certain background. It just, the best thing is to always, if somebody wants to really get into this field, get into it with any level. Just like, yeah, if that's just going to be me bringing coffee, yeah, I might have shot 3 Kannada films or Bollywood films. It's a different genre. It works different. It's not. I mean, I've worked on some commercial shoots, and it's apple and oranges.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if you go on a commercial shoot, you'll find 25 people. You'll have one person to bring you tea, one person to bring you a biscuit, one person to carry your bag, one person to carry your second bag, one person to pull focus, one person to hold the camera, one person to turn the camera. In our field, all of that is done by one person.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, the other question that people always think is we stay in fancy places. We don't stay in fancy places. If we stay in places that like there's space, go stay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So I'm also kind of curious, like, do you find any parallels between one parallel that I can make out of is that what you said about if you want, it doesn't happen overnight. Like, it takes time. It's the same with sport, right? If you want to become a good downhiller or a good MTB single track rider, it needs a lot of work over a period of time, while practicing skills over and over again, taking that corner over and over again, hitting that berm over and over again just right. All these things take time over a period of time, and it is similar when it comes to profession like videography or photography, right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, if you speak to any professional athlete, the few that I've spoken with, they've been cycling 5, 6 years old. They started getting competitive at 11, 12. And yeah, by the time they're 18, they've been competitive for 10 years. And that's only when they started to actually start seeing progression.
Right.
So 10 years is pretty much that magic number of you need to be in anything for 10 years to realize that if you're good or not. And I mean, I think it's only with the people I've spoken to in sports, if you're doing marathons or stuff like that, then the older you are, the better it is, because experience allows you to like how much energy you need to give out and how to be able to do long distance. But honestly, yeah, I mean, you can't wake up one morning and say, like, I'm going to ride two of the Nilgiris next week, or I'm going to train for 2 weeks, and I'll be fine. Yeah, you hit the Kalati Ghats, and then you're gone by the second hairpin bend.
Yeah.
It takes some training. It takes that time. It takes understanding of what is getting involved. You're getting involved with, definitely. When I went to did some of the enduro races in Nepal and Thailand, I went with very little training. I mean, just over the years, whatever training I did out of my own. But then you start seeing proper professional athletes. I mean, people who are in the world circuit, and then you start speaking to them how their understanding, and it's a job for them. It is a 9 to 5 job. They have to train 8 hours a day, like
True.
how you would go to an office.
Right.
It is not like, oh, I'm going to go into sports. It's going to be more leisure. I'm going to travel a lot more. I'm going to just be able to chill a bit more. No, because it is still work. They have to market themselves. They have to train. They have to get sponsors in. They have to be putting their name out there. It's not easy being a professional athlete, as you would call it.
Yeah.
It's a hustle.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
It is a hustle. It is a hustle, to be good at or great at anything that you do. It's just, it doesn't happen just like that by a snap of a finger.
Oh,
Right?
no.
Yeah. Yeah. So, coming to you, you need to, while you are handling these big rigs and big cameras and all these, you need to stay fit, of course. You need to keep yourself fit as well. So, how do you nowadays, with all the travel and stuff, how do you manage your fitness and stuff?
Yeah, that's been always a hot topic in my head. Unfortunately, we don't always have the luxury. Sometimes we don't have the space to like have an area where you can work out. Sometimes we don't have the time or the mental energy, because sometimes we're out at 5 o'clock in the morning. So that means we out at 5 means we're up by 4. That gets us then back at say 6, 7 in the evening.
Wow.
And that means it's not like we had then somewhere in between, like a moment where you just pass out. No, we are working. We're running right through. And then to try to stay fit, it gets so the body, it gets tiring. So the body definitely has taken a beating over the years. Whenever I can now, like right now, I've gone back to my old gym where I used to train a lot. I have a few injuries, so they sort me out on that front. They take that into mind, like, okay, there's certain exercises you can and can't do, so they know my system now for a few years, and now I'm getting back onto that regiment. But yeah, it's a big challenge to try to stay fit. I mean, some of our cameras, they weigh 15, 20 kilos, and
Yeah.
so you lifting boxes and bags helps. Like you have to carry them a few times, so it helps in that front
With the right technique, of course.
with the right technique. My back's given out a few times where just flat
Right.
couldn't move because we sit a lot in the vehicle when we're driving. Like if we're in the parks, we have to sit in the car. We can't step out. We can't go like quickly go for a jog or something.
Yeah,
So
stretch your legs or anything
we sit
like
in the
that,
car
yeah.
the whole day, and then we get out, and we like takes us like a minute to just like get mobility back. Um, it's hard to find that balance. And I think again, it falls back onto that. You just need to speak to the right people, have that mental want, like, okay, I need to stay fit somehow. Otherwise, yeah, by the time when you're 25, yeah, you can bounce off walls. You can break a leg within like 2 weeks. You're like running
You're
around
fine,
again.
yeah.
The older you get, it gets, even if you have a bit of a twig, like a little muscle thing, it takes like a week to sort out. Age does play a factor, especially if you're not constant at making your system feel better about itself. Nutrition, all that, it plays a big role. Unfortunately, we don't have that. I think that mindset here too much to maintain that that nutrition or something like that. Because a lot of times when we are out in the field, we stay either with the forest department or we stay in a hotel or we stay, and sometimes for them to grasp like, oh, I have this very specific meal intake. Like this is food, you got to eat it. So we that's how we have to be. Like wherever we go, where there's food, you eat, because you don't know if you can have breakfast, lunch, or dinner. There's been days that we haven't eaten at all.
Right.
Because we just had to run out. We couldn't pack. We couldn't prep. We just had to go because there was something happening. And it's difficult to maintain a regiment or be very fixed in dietary requirements or even in exercise requirements. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the only thing I can say. It's difficult. It needs to be in the back of your head. If you have the energy, you need to do something. If you don't, well,
you kind of have to hustle and manage.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, now coming back to kind of cycling, mountain biking, and downhill biking and stuff. You've been in that scene, and you kind of follow with loose riders India and all the other stuff, right? So over the years, how did that progress or not progress? How is it looking for the future?
Now, back in 2012 when it started, there were pretty much just two people. In Bangalore. There was Nelly and Iggy that were running it. Like they were kind of pushing the mountain biking scene in Bangalore. There was a little bit there was some happening in Pune. Pretty much the northeast, nothing was happening at that point. Loose Riders came to be in India in 2015 when I started getting more into the scene. Now, Loose Rider is a global community that started out of Chiang Mai in Thailand, because there's a good scene and they just wanted something to be basically a bit of a club. And it had some professional riders that came in and went during that time. And now it's grown to a complete global community where you have chapters pretty much across the world. And it's just basically a very loose-minded or kind of community that just share any aspect of mountain biking, like mainly enduro, freeride, and downhill, because it's the same group of people who've whacked their heads too many times on the ground, so we all kind of think the same way. And so that was in 2015. I had a little bit more time to push it. Now, unfortunately, I didn't have that much time to like pursue it and really push for it. But at that point, when I was running it as much as I could, I was trying to encourage prize money, pushing athletes to go. So for a couple of events, I would like sponsor the prize money for that. And then I kind of started seeing how really the cycling scene started developing in India. And it wasn't for the better, actually. I started seeing it a lot more, and it wasn't for the best, unfortunately, at that point. And that also started becoming a bit disheartening. Bangalore especially has these very short spikes of interest. So people who were interested, they phase out of it very quick. Pune has a very progressive scene right now. They really push themselves to where they're right now. And Ladakh as well. They've grown in the past 3-4 years to have a bike park. The Northeast I think, has progressed the most, the way that they are running tournaments, like competitions, races, and things like that. And the reason why I'm saying progressed is how I've seen support being given to them. In Bangalore, the reason why I'm saying we've progressed the least is because we've what I have felt and faced on several discussions is faced the least amount of support from either companies or people or government, because we require places that have a hill.
Right.
That's kind of the whole point. We need a hill.
Exactly.
There are not many places in Bangalore that has a hill. So a few hills that we did have, they started actually becoming, we weren't having access to them anymore.
Right. Like so, I was saying, the Turhali
Turhali was great. That got taken away from us. Then, unfortunately, Nandi Hills, which there was a constant back and forth if we could use it or not use it. Now, because of the recent the situations that happened after the lockdowns had lifted, where people were getting lost and then they had to find airlift, that has impacted the riding community as well,
Oh, yeah.
where we can't take a car up or something like that on the weekends now. That requires us only to go on the weekday, but then it's like for myself, I haven't been able to go there. There are a couple of other people who've been managing to head to Nandi, but it hasn't progressed. It's kind of taken a back step. Like at one point, we were able to really progress Nandi Hills to a point that a trail was built, a trail was maintained. We were able to have a race there, and I feel that we just keep coming to a roadblock where we're not able to push with the government through to like make them understand that this is a sport. This is something that people are pursuing. There's a national team. We need to push it as much as we can, but we always come to this roadblock of people, oh, you'll get hurt. We don't want that. I'm like, it's part and parcel of it.
Yeah.
And the more you do it, the better you are, and the less hurt you will get. And unfortunately, I never saw that real push from that community grow as much as I hoped, especially when we pushed loose riders in and we actually had a good number of people riding. And I always found it a bit funny that during the BBCH, during the downhill races, we had sometimes 20 riders. And I'm like, I've never seen 20 riders on a trail. And then it turned out to be people who've never ridden it before. And then it was like, this is now a recipe for disaster. And this is where things are going to go wrong.
Right.
And I had to be sometimes the one saying, you're not riding anymore. I mean, you haven't trained, you haven't practiced. I mean, we can't put you on the trail. And the BBCH did try to push it as much as they could, but unfortunately, I think for them also, it is time and money. There was Sunil Najapa from who did the Sunil Nanjapa who did the Bangalore Mountain Festival. He tried pushing it.
Yeah.
He came across pretty much the same issues that I'm talking about now. It's like it grew, but then it kind of pushed back in terms of the amount that he was investing in it and the amount of then the reciprocal things that he was getting for it. So it kind of came to a stalemate. The reason why I'm saying now the Northeast, they actually have like a Northeastern series. They have like 6 races in the year,
Right.
like in Assam, in Arunachal, and the other states, and they do kind of a tour, and that is kind of now progressing. There's Gautam Taude who's been now pushing that as well. He's based out of Pune. And also now they have an enduro race there, 2-day enduro race in Arunachal. So that's why I'm saying it's the most progressed region of the sport. Whereas we kind of we were pioneering it, we were starting it, but we didn't progress it here. It kind of dwindled a bit. And there's still some people who are like, we're trying to push. And the unfortunate, I think the biggest theme that I would always come back with is when we were building features, because in downhill enduro, we need features. We need things to jump over. We need rocks to go through, navigate through.
Right.
We would build them in like Nandi Hills, Avlahalli, Turali, now Avlahalli. And the biggest response that we always used to get, like, oh, but not everybody can ride it. Make it easier. And we're like, that's the whole point. We need to make it difficult, because if you see what the international circuits are doing, this is something a 12-year-old would ride.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So unless you have those features and the trail difficulty at a certain level, how are you going to progress? Right. Also, like you were saying, the development is, in my view, at least, it is a kind of factor of many things. The support that one is, like you said, that the availability of hills, the terrain, the accessibility to those, and then so naturally places like Pune, we had a lot more options, and Northeast and all that, there are a lot more options for in terms of terrain. But also the support that you are saying from the authorities, the people who are even if they're not big in supporting, if they are out of, not putting hurdles in your way, that also is a lot more helpful, right? Like you're saying, you're not allowed to go in the weekend to Nandi, or something or the other would come in and kind of put you off the efforts that people like you, Sunil Nanjappa, and all those are putting in. If you are not seeing anything that is like substantial, you would obviously get disheartened, and how much would you bang your head against that wall, right? So I guess that is it is the place where a lot of things kind of got started, but unfortunately not. It is good in a way to see other places burgeoning or progressing, but it would be great to kind of see this place also see more and more action, I think.
Yeah, the one thing that I always feel like when like my neighbor Manik Taneja, he does a lot of like over the lockdown, he's learned how to wheelie and manual and stuff like that, and those are skill sets. But I think what our genre unfortunately comes away with is because we wheelie, we manual, we jump, we wear full face helmets, knee guards. We kind of get put into this category of being rowdies, or oh, you're here to disturb. Like, oh, the cops, they see people manualing on the road, like on motorbikes. I mean, that is different from what we are doing.
Exactly.
But
this is a sport in a confined environment.
And then when we do it on the road, like, oh, you're disturbing the peace. Oh, what happens if you hit somebody? Oh, what? I mean, like, those are what if questions. It hasn't happened. I mean, yes, be precautious, be careful, don't do it. But when you're seeing us do it, don't stop. Like, don't think we're gonna influence the kids in the wrong way. Like, if a kid does it, or 12 years old does a manual or a wheelie, well, he's learned balance. He's learned certain tricks or like how to hold that bike better. He's learned something, and I feel that's a very cultural thing that we have compared to if you're looking at Europe, US, Canada, now pretty much Thailand, and where it's all encouraged. Yeah, do it. Get out, be out in nature. But here's like, no, don't.
Right.
Like, don't get onto a mountain bike because you'll get, you might fall and scrape your leg on a rock or something. Or don't go out cycling on the road. You might get hit by somebody. And so there's always that restriction, and that kind of falls also with the government, with the forest department. When they used to see us, it was fine because they kind of saw us as, we used to carry garbage out. We used to move stuff out. So they were fine, especially the beat guys. But now over the years, it's kind of pushed to that way where they just don't want anybody there. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're a guy cycling, or a guy just walking, or a guy going there for a picnic and boozing or something like that, it all comes under the same umbrella. Nobody's in, everybody out. If you give one person permission, that means we need to give the next 5 people permission to get in. And irrelevant what they do there. And that has kind of unfortunately gotten all your birders out. Like, people used to go bird watching. They're not allowed to go anymore.
Right.
So that's a restrictive space. Now that's shortened their space. If you just like to get your kids out in nature, that's not available anymore. So because of all these perceived notions of what it might be or what it represents, it restricts a lot of other things. It kind of has a domino effect onto everything else.
Right.
And even though earlier we could educate them, or we could show them that, like, hey, we're just here, we're not disturbing anything, we're not breaking anything, we're not cutting anything down, we're actually trying to help. Those guys were good. But now I think they've had so much of bad, situations that they just don't want any more headaches in terms of people getting lost in the woods. What happened in Nandi, people having barbecues and boozing sessions at Nandi, or especially the joyriders going up Nandi hills on motorbikes and then coming ripping down. They're like, we just don't want any of that. We don't want any headaches. So nobody goes there, kind of situation. And it's kind of spoiled the party for everybody.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, back in the day, we used to go, uh, we used to have access to the Savandurga forest and all that. Where is it all that gone?
Yeah.
That is such a treasure trove in terms of
Yeah.
MTB riding, downhilling, and all that. It is just gone. We don't have any access to all that now.
And I honestly think that if the forest department, uh, I never had a problem with if they just say, okay, if you're going mountain biking, pay 200 rupees, pay 500 rupees. Sure.
Yeah, that would be
But
perfect. Yeah.
then they need to use that money to maintain those trails
Right.
of making sure there's no garbage, no litter, no this. I mean, if don't make it 10 rupees, 25 rupees. And if you make it 100, 200, 300 rupees, um, people will think twice about it.
Only those are serious about
Really
it.
interested,
Yeah.
really wanting to go. And it happens across the world. It's not like you go to Nepal and say, oh, I'm going to just go ride. You pay for the trails. It might not be an official fee, but it's a fee that the organization gives then to the villagers to maintain the trails. Same thing happens in Bali. Same thing happens in Thailand, where any organization or anybody who goes rides those trails, they kind of pool a kitty together and give that to the people living on that trail as we're using it. Don't block it. Here's some compensation. So at the end of it, you're always going to be paying. You pay a bike park, an entrance fee, and it's not a small sum. It's a fair bit that you pay to go into a bike
Right.
park across the world. So just because one's charging for it, I don't think it should then be restrictive. It then would encourage more. I remember back in 2006 or 7, where Nandi was proposed to be an adventure hotspot. Like,
It is
they,
still proposed to be. Yeah.
yeah, so we're talking about 2006,
Right.
2005, yeah, 2006,
17 years
7,
ago.
8. We're talking about then where they were talking to different people like, okay, we're going to have paragliding, we're going to have hikes, we're going to have cycling, we're going to now block off the Nandi Road. I think they did that at one point.
Yeah.
Like everybody had to park at the bottom and then you could just either walk up or cycle up.
Right.
And they're like, we're going to do that every weekend. It was all proposed. It's all technically all those plans are still there in existence. It just unfortunately now they want to build I think a cable car. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great, less traffic going up, hopefully, but the potential's there, and just unfortunately, I think we don't have the right people either lobbying for it or being able to explain it. Like unfortunately I'm not a person that can go and speak to officials and like, okay, this is what we're doing. I'm not a paper guy. I'm not a guy who
Right.
can like write good paragraphs and like show the plus and minus point and speak to officials and like, okay, let's get these things going. There are a lot of people who've been trying for years who I know. I mean, Sunil being one of them, he's broken his head many times about it.
Right.
But I mean, if guys like that can't do it, I mean, at this point, we just need to wait until the people on the other end change or they then slowly understand. Nothing happens fast. It's a slow progression, unfortunately.
Yeah. Man, this has been a fantastic chat.
Yeah.
And we touched upon a lot of things. I hope this riding scene overall improves here as well. Like we're talking about a lot of issues that we are currently facing, but I hope they get kind of resolved and we see better days for MTB, downhill, enduro, and all these in our city as well, and more so in all over India. But this has been a fantastic conversation. I had super fun
It was
chatting
good
about
being here.
all things videography, wildlife photography, and all that, and MTV as well.
Yeah, it was good. It's nice to see that it's all still connects at some level. It's not separate things. It just
Yeah.
it's one big happy community, and we always want to try seeing things progress in every level. I mean, from being in cycling, filming, or wildlife, it's all kind of going hand in hand.
Right. Yeah. 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 And thank you for taking the time and spending the time with the
Anytime.
Working Athlete podcast.
Anytime.
That was my conversation with Robin. I hope you enjoyed that. If you are enjoying these podcasts and are finding them useful, please consider supporting the channel by subscribing to it on YouTube as well as on your favorite podcasting app. It really helps. Thanks again for your continuous support. See you next week with another guest.